Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday. This week we have with us Nimi Bello. Hey, Nimi, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
So Team Tuesday, of course, is all about teams. But before we dive into that, Nimi, do share with us, what's the book that most inspired you in your role as a Scrum Master?
Oh man, that was a tough one. That's a tough one for me. But I would say there's a book called Drive by Daniel Pink, and it places an emphasis on just motivation, empowering teams. So I would say that, and honestly, Rich Dad Poor Dad too was also a good one too, that I enjoyed reading. I didn't mention anything that has to do with any technicalities for a reason, just because I feel like we talked a little bit about relationships earlier, and I think that I want to continue on that theme because I feel like that's an area of opportunity that most Scrum Masters don't think about, is that relationship building aspect. Not only within teams, but even outside of your teams, the counterparts that you socialize with on a daily basis. But I would say Drive is definitely a really, really good one that kind of just places a huge emphasis on just the motivational aspect of teams.
From the book, The Drive by Daniel Pink, is there like one lesson, one tip, or something you think all Scrum Masters should know and maybe also makes them curious enough to read the book?
Yeah, intrinsic motivation, I think, because it really, really focuses on how you empower, how you build discipline around certain aspects of just providing that. Because I mean, we all need to be motivated in certain aspects, and sometimes being the motivator, you need to be motivated too yourself. So I would say that importance of just like getting in that mindset of just that motivation and that empowerment, I would say that's the main thing that stood out to me. It's been a while since I read it. But I know that when I read it, that was the main thing that stood out to me, was just the intrinsic motivation aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Intrinsic, meaning that it comes from within people rather than being pushed on. It's the difference between volunteering and being volume told.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So that was the book. And now, of course, we turn our attention to the teams and how sometimes they can become their own worst enemies. So, Nimi, do share a story of a team that you worked with. Tell us a little bit about the context, and then walk us through the steps in how those small little behaviors over time developed and became big problems for that team.
I would say that I've seen teams really self-destruct because of psychological safety within the team, outside of the team, in leadership, in management. The list goes on and on. But I would say that psychological safety is something that, if it's not prioritized, it will have a major negative impact on the team. And in this case, a team was working on a very, very high stake project. It was more so like a cybersecurity compliance related project. And I remember that the teams were afraid to voice concerns because there was an engineering manager that was very strong personality, and it felt like it was his show most of the time. He did most of the talking, most of the delegating, and the team literally just shut down because now psychological safety was impacted. Even challenging estimations, how stories were being estimated, and coming in and saying, well, no, we can't have that being a 3-point story. It has to be a 1-point story. And it was a very, very interesting dynamic because literally we would be in this meeting, and I think he was also getting some pressure put on him too, and he was bringing that energy into the team. And this situation honestly just taught me the importance of creating a safe space for open dialogue, where the team can speak up without any fear or feeling like, oh, I don't have a voice. That's the worst thing that you can do especially when you want a team to produce quality work.
So tell us a little bit more. So you talked about some specific examples, like not feeling safe enough to challenge estimations, and even on the contrary, the team
Right.
being challenged on the estimations they gave. What were some of the other signs that gave you the understanding that, okay, this team, they can't express themselves, they don't feel like their voice is heard? Like, what were some of those other examples?
I would say the morale, like the engagement reduced. And I think it changed because there was an involvement from this engineering manager that was not there initially. And I think his involvement changed the culture and the dynamics of the team fairly quickly. People were not coming on camera. People were not speaking up in the meeting. People were not they were not being active contributors or even volunteering their insights. And for me, I know that from my experience, I've gone into a space where I know how to engage my teams. And I'm not going to lie, like this was a situation that was frustrating for me because it took away the ability for me to kind of say, hey, let me protect my team. And I think that was the hardest part for me to deal with, because it's like, okay, I'm trying my best, but I also don't want to step on toes to get fired because he is above my pay grade. So what do I do in this situation? And I had to make a decision on having a hard conversation that I did not prepare to have. And I was ready to risk my job at that point because it was creating a lot of issues. And having that hard conversation was something that was a catalyst for my coaching capabilities, because I went into this conversation, I had the data points. I did not speak from an emotional aspect. I think that was the learning moment for me of just coming in and saying, hey, you are coming into my meeting and you're pissing off my team. It was a different approach of going in and saying, hey, I want to get your perspective. How do you think the team is feeling with your involvement? Let me hear from you, versus me telling him all the things that he did wrong. And what happened in this situation was there was a little bit of an awareness that came from him. And this is where I was able to say, okay, now that we have awareness, what can we do to take action items so that this does not repeat itself again? I think that when I provided that level of context and saying, hey, I would love to see the team provide their insights when you ask XYZ. And I think going in that approach and having the offline conversations and just even getting the data points also helps me to be a better Scrum Master. Because the first time it happened, I could have came off of mute and say, hey, can we please put a pin on that? And maybe that would not be enough. It probably would have led to other things. But I would say that situation made me to really dig deep to go into being a better coach, providing a better safe space, where maybe I have to have a conversation with people at that level and saying, hey, here's how our team works. Our team works well when we are able to engage in a conversation, as opposed to coming in and saying, I am the authority and I'm giving you something to do and you have to do it this way. So I think having those set expectations beforehand would have probably helped to reduce a lot of the friction and the psychological safety impacts.
I really like how you framed the conversation with this leader, that it was all about asking them how they felt the team was performing, because of course there are some people who would be potentially blind to this kind of behavior, but it doesn't take a lot of observation to see when the team members are shutting down their cameras or not actively participating in meetings or disengaging from estimation discussions, right? Like that those things are quite obvious for anyone that is paying attention. And once that you called it awareness is there, then we can talk about solutions. So how do we change this? And what do you think would be a better way, right? Because it isn't just us sharing, hey, our team does need to work this way. It's also about, okay, so what do you think would help my team, right? What would, in your mind, be a better team? Like, and how do we get there, right? And I think that this creating of awareness and then discussing solutions together, I think that was a great way to frame the coaching conversation.
Right.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that, Nimi.
Absolutely.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work
we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.